Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Stephanie Reeves Millner is Vice President of CX Management at Teleperformance US. She's also a board member of TP Women and she's based in Phoenix, Arizona. One of her key areas of focus is American retail, which is an industry that's seen a lot of change in the past 6 months. I called Stephanie to ask about recent retail innovation and how retail brands can get closer to their customers in a post-COVID environment. Listen to her explanation of why we need to start calling it the next normal, not new normal. Okay, Stephanie, I know that one of your key vertical focus areas is retail, and this is an area where we've seen a lot of innovation during the pandemic because the retailers had to close their physical stores, or all the non-essential ones anyway. So there's been a strong focus on e-commerce. I mean, what are some of the stories or changes that you've seen during this period of the last 6 months?
That's a great question, Mark. So I know that innovation oftentimes is associated with technology right now in dialogue, but I really want to address it initially from a standpoint of innovation and just thought process, right? So there are two particular brands that I have either spoken to or investigated, and I thought they did something very smart. And what they did was, as their locations were closed down, they made offers to the experts inside of the brick and mortar to be part of their digital program. So Home Depot is a great example of that. They took some people that had been in the stores who had excellent experience with their products, really actually had kind of that DIY mentality, and allowed them to be their experts in digital engagement, which obviously elevates the customer experience. And it allows for people to create that confidence in Home Depot when they are shopping, once they are able to get back into the stores, right? And so you're seeing an incredible increase in overall buy for, organizations like the Home Depots and the places where people are actually doing a lot of things in their homes now because they have the opportunity to. Lululemon is another example of that. They have digital educators, and they've taken people that have been in the stores because obviously their foot traffic is down, and because of their square footage, obviously they're only allowed to have a limited number of people in the store at a time anyway. So their need for actual employees on the ground, if you will, is limited. So with these digital educators, you have people on the phone who are basically not necessarily a personal shopper, but they're educating you on the types of products that you might like and you might want to, as if you were in store, and let you have that experience. Do you like a high-waisted? Are you going hiking, or are you doing yoga? Are you actually just wearing them as part of your outfit as an employee, as a work at home? So I think there's some innovation inside of too, of just the concept of what is customer experience and how can you improve it based on the tools you already have at your hand.
Yeah, that's great that they've managed to sort of reposition the team in that way. I think it's also interesting, and I saw some data from McKinsey saying that a lot of customers tried e-commerce and online shopping for the first time because they were forced to. Do you think that we're going to see a lot of people that have actually enjoyed that experience not going back to the stores or the malls now?
I think that they're going to have a modified approach to their shopping. And in talking to a lot of different people about their own personal experience side of that, myself being one of them. So grocery shopping is something I tend to enjoy doing, which I know I'm not a normal person, but like to go into the store and actually make those choices. I go, if I can get my teen boys to go, it's a way to get them to spend time with me because they get to pick out their own snacks. And they always say I never have enough food in the house, obviously, because they demolish it as soon as it gets in the house. But that was something that shifted for me, obviously, to more of an online experience as, COVID hit. And so now I'm a little more modified in how I approach that. There are some groceries that I have, either I do pick up where there's delivery, and there's others that I go on store. So I think you're going to see more of a hybrid approach in how people do it. It's not going to be I'm just a in-store, I'm just an online, although I think you're going to have a high propensity, as we're seeing, right? The digital experience is expanding, more sales inside of digital. And so that leads us into, of course, the cost of digital and the reduced margin, obviously, that's experienced by those retailers as a result of that shift in purchasing.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to supporting an omnichannel approach, whether it's online, on an app, mobile device, or physical shopping as well. And we've been talking about this for years, as a desirable approach. But is this now essential?
Is the omnichannel essential? Is that the
Yeah.
question? Oh
Yes.
my God. Yes, absolutely. Yes. You and I have been talking about this for a year. I mean, we've been mega advocates of the omnichannel experience for quite some time. And I think at this point, it's not a matter of will you have it, but it's a matter of how will you execute it. So obviously you don't want to be in a channel in which you don't have expertise or which you're not going to support. I think that is one of the most devastating decisions a brand can ever make is to take a step into a particular channel where they have not decided how they want to show up as a brand and how much they want to support it. But in terms of the overall customer experience, we've got to meet the customer where they are when they want to be there, right? So I'm a great example of that. If I'm going to be at my desk and working and I'm trying to get in multiple things at a time, I might be able to have a separate chat going on where I have time to wait and pending questions are coming through. But in other environments, I want to be able to pick up the phone and I'm willing to wait for a little while. But when I get on the phone with them, I need to have that conversation because I'm driving down the road and I need to get this off my list in that 15-minute window I have to myself to actually execute something. So I think that, again, it goes back to meet the customer where they are and don't expect that customer is always going to be inside of only one channel and give them the opportunity to know that there's other channels available to them.
And you wrote an article about this recently, predicting a sort of a 2-year road to recovery. And really, I think it's like a 2-year program of digital transformation. But you said something very specifically in the article that said retailers really need to start thinking primarily around customer relationships and not just transactions. So how do they start doing that?
I think customer relationships comes into so there's a lot of focus on NPS and CSAT, and I find it fascinating how different organizations look at defining like why they look at those measures and how they define what those measures mean to their organization. And I was thinking last night about, so funny you asked this question, I was thinking about last night about how do we make sure that the customer is interested in what kind of questions do we need to be asking, and are we asking the right question, right? So it's not just a matter of, are we asking a question, but are we asking the right question? So my thought was, it's not just a matter of, would you recommend our brand, our product, our company to your friend? I was thinking in terms of, if I were going to make a decision, I might refer you to a particular brand. But if you want to know if I'm actually going to make a decision to purchase again, people tend to purchase at places in which it matters to them, gifts, right? So I was thinking perhaps maybe the question needs to transition to something along those lines of, are you making decisions about purchasing your Christmas gifts with us? Why or why not? Creating more of an intimate dialogue where the person both feels heard and it gives them a trigger of thought in terms of, I wasn't thinking about this brand, but maybe I should be. Just another way to think about it. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that if we went back a few years, it would feel very unusual to have a conversation and actually engage with your favorite supermarket. But now, if you look at social networks like Twitter, you'll see quite often people are pinging a message and saying, "Hey, have you got a good chicken soup recipe?" And stuff like that seemed bizarre a few years ago. And now it's like, well, I have a relationship with my favorite retailer.
Yes, and they're advocates. So I recently, and it's funny because I've been to some conferences before, and there's some brands who do a really good job of creating that relationship at a very, very young age. So let's think about like John Deere, right, or Harley Davidson. They have products that are available, and there's shirts, and there's this concept that's given to children at a very young age. So when you get older, if you know nothing about buying a tractor and you suddenly have a farm, John Deere is where you're going to go first, right? If you're aspiring to have a motorcycle at some time when you're 10 years old, girl or boy, you're thinking about a Harley Davidson. So I say that to you because recently, one of my girlfriends, her daughter couldn't get into Target because of COVID. And so she wanted a Target party. And so they got red shirts and they did name tags that said Target on it. They did little bullseye cookies. They made signs that put them all over on all of the doors in the house that said like, linens this way and kids clothing this way and those kinds of things. And she just thought that was such a fun, fantastic experience. So going back to how do you create a relationship? We create an experience with the brand, and you do create a personalized engagement with them.
And I think that, moving forward now, it's clear that there's going to be this focus on engagement, customer relationships and customer experience rather than just, how can we sell more product? What do you think are some of the changes we're going to see analysts are all calling this the new normal, this post-COVID sort of period. So how is it going to be different for retailers?
I think that's a great question. I was talking to Home Depot, and one of the things that one of their senior executives said was, we've kind of transitioned from calling it the new normal to the next normal. And I thought that was a fascinating transition in verbiage, right? Because a new normal almost implies that it's going to stay this way now for a bit. But as we know, this has been an ongoing, evolving experience. And so a next normal, I think, is much more fitting to that descriptor. And I think if we can have that is the agile mindset that we're going to need inside of retail in order to be able to really adapt. So, for example, I went to our local mall recently, and I was making purchases for my son because they were actually going from virtual learning back to in school this week, right? And going to be on campus. And there were lines to get into the stores, much like you would have to get into a restaurant, right? And it was fascinating to be in that experience where we're waiting. You have a 30-minute ETA, like you're getting on a ride at Disney, or you are going to go to a restaurant. Well, there was no, the experience was difficult because you're not used to that. You're not acclimated to that. But there are brands that anticipated this. And so they have in their app, much like a restaurant, where you can check in, or like Disney, and let them know you want to come in. And then they alert you when you're going to be up in the next 5 minutes, right? So that adaptability inside of retail, I think, is what we're going to see. And some trends that may have been our norm in one industry become the norm in another.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm @Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.